Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight,
I'm ruling you out of order. A roll call vote is started.
Inside today's city council meeting that featured a tense standoff between an alderperson and Mayor Lightfoot, followed by an abrupt adjournment.
Plus, is this the beginning of Council Wars Part 2? Our Spotlight Politics team examines today's city council fireworks.
I'm very optimistic about the future of Chicago Public Schools.
CPS is losing its top leader as the teachers union fights layoffs, the future of Chicago Public Schools.
A new report finds the life expectancy gap between Black and non-Black Chicagoans has widened. What's driving the inequities?
We check in on the current state of the opioid epidemic in Cook County after last year's spike in overdoses.
Highlighting cartoons, comics, and graphic novels, part of Chicago's contributions to the history of cartooning in a new show at the Museum of Contemporary Art.
La 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 feels well.
I remember that interview. And as Phil Ponce gets ready to move from twice weekly appearances on Chicago Tonight to special assignments, we look back at his raucous conversation with Elmo. But first, some of today's top stories. The President and U.S. Attorney General announced new federal measures to crack down on gun violence in Chicago and other cities. President Biden held a roundtable on gun violence this afternoon, and among those taking part was Chicago violence prevention activist Eddie Bocanegra. Biden and Attorney General Merrick Garland say the plans call for a federal crackdown on gun trafficking, and they say the Justice Department will create strike forces to double down on illegal gun sales.
If you willfully sell a gun to someone who's prohibited from possessing it, if you willfully fail to run a background check, if you willfully falsify a record, if you willfully fail to cooperate with the tracing requests or inspections, my message to you is this: we'll find you.
The President also called for $350 million out of COVID stimulus funds to be directed toward police departments. A history-making moment before all the fireworks in City Council today. The Council confirmed Annette Nance Holt as Commissioner of the Chicago Fire Department. She's the first African-American woman to lead that agency. Nance Holt is a 30-year veteran of the department and served previously as First Deputy Commissioner. She is also the mother of Blair Holt, who was killed at 16 years old in 2007 after trying to shield a friend from gunfire. And we'll have more on the rest of today's council meeting in just a few moments. The country's second gentleman paid a visit to Chicago today to promote COVID-19 vaccination. Doug Emhoff, husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, stopped by a Black-owned barbershop in Englewood this morning to tout the vaccine in an effort to boost rates in certain areas of the country. Englewood has lagged behind the rest of the city in vaccination rates. Emhoff also made a visit at the Esperanza Health Clinic later in the afternoon. Today's City Council meeting turned messy and then never really finished. A vote to rename Lakeshore Drive came to a screeching halt, and the appointment of Chicago's new top lawyer was blocked, followed by a visibly heated argument between Mayor Lori Lightfoot and an alderperson. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. Heather, today was to be the day that the question of renaming Lakeshore Drive was finally to be resolved, but it got delayed a second time. Let's take a listen.
I respect my colleagues' decision. I'm not going to ask them to change, but with that, I motion to adjourn this meeting and reconvene on Friday at 11 o'clock.
Is there a second? Your motion is to recess?
To recess, I'm sorry.
So Heather, meeting suspended. They'll reconvene on Friday. What exactly happened?
Well, it went off the rails less than an hour before or after the meeting began when Alderman Raymond Lopez and Jeanette Taylor blocked a vote with a parliamentary maneuver on Celia Meza, who is set to become the city's top lawyer and will be the first Latina to serve in that role. They were angry with the way the law department has been handling the lawsuit filed by Anjanette Young, who was the social worker who was handcuffed while naked while pleading for help as Chicago police officers mistakenly raided her home. The city has been unwilling to settle that lawsuit, and now it's in limbo, and several aldermen are angry about it because Mayor Lightfoot has already apologized for the officer's conduct, and Superintendent of Police David Brown said that her human rights were violated. That case is now in limbo, just like the city council meeting.
And Mayor Lori Lightfoot had a visceral reaction to the action from alderpersons Ray Lopez and Jeanette Taylor. Then she goes and leaves the dais, calls a recess, and has a very heated argument with Alderman Taylor. What did they say to each other?
Well, what they said was that we talked to Taylor after the meeting, and she said that Lightfoot asked her to allow the confirmation vote to take place, that she was hurting a fellow woman of color. At one point, it was very, very heated, and Taylor said she told Lightfoot to put her hands down and to stop treating her like a child. It was truly a wild and unprecedented scene that indicates that the mayor's relations with the city council are just really at an all-time low. After the meeting, Lightfoot canceled her press conference, which is normally held after the city council meeting, and released a statement blasting Taylor and Lopez, saying that they created a spectacle that prevented the city council from doing the business of the city.
Boy, such an unusual scene that you never see the mayor leave the dais like that. All right, Alderman David Moore was also furious today because of another delay in his initiative to rename Lakeshore Drive after Jean-Baptiste Pointe de Sable. Let's take a listen.
I don't know. All I know is that democracy was trampled on today. That's all I know. Whether it was because of DuSable, whether it's because of some other reason, this council is not a council of order anymore. It's not a council of rules. Everything, any and everything goes, and I'm sad to say that you're going to see fireworks in this city council that we should not have, that the people should not have to deal with, because I have to stand up and fight for people whose democracy is being trampled on. It has nothing to just do with DuSable, but when people's democracy is trampled upon, they need a voice that has to stand up for them, and I will.
Fireworks, Heather Sharon, is that what we're bound to see on Friday when they reconvene?
That's right. They'll attempt to confirm Mesa, pass a huge, massive business change to the way to help businesses recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, and deal with the proposal to rename Lakeshore Drive.
All right, a lot on the docket and a lot of tension in City Council. We'll have to see what happens. Heather, thank you so much. And we'll see you again later in the program with Spotlight Politics team.
Thanks, Paris.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. That's at WTTW.com/news. And now to Brandis and a new report on life expectancy among Chicagoans. Brandis.
Paris, the life expectancy gap between Black and non-Black Chicagoans has widened. That's according to a recent report from the Health Equity Index Committee at the Chicago Department of Public Health. Between 2012 and 2017, the gap grew from 8.3 years to 9.2, and that was before the coronavirus pandemic, which we all know had a disparate impact on Black Chicagoans. Joining us to talk about the causes of the gap and what can be done about it are Ya Simpson and Blair Akins, epidemiologists at the Chicago Department of Public Health and members of the department's Health Equity Index Committee. Blair and Ya, thanks to you both for joining us. So we know that the report found that Black Chicagoans on average live to 71.4 years, while non-Black Chicagoans live to, on average, 80.6 years. Blair, what do these numbers tell you about health inequities in Chicago?
Yes, these numbers show us that there are a great health inequities and disparities in Chicago when we're looking at the lives of Black Chicagoans compared to non-Black Chicagoans. And so this 9.2 year gap is really, we identify some of the top drivers of that gap in our report. Those being chronic disease, HIV and other infectious diseases such as COVID, opioid overdose, infant mortality, and homicides.
And hopefully we can get into those a little bit deeper as well. The Health Equity Index Committee, team of 5 Black women, we're talking to 2 of them right now. Ya, what precipitated this research and why did you want to focus on life expectancy?
Yes, ma'am, and thank you for having us, Brandis. What precipitated this gathering, if you will, this coming, was because at the health department, we wanted to amplify our voices as Black women. We felt that some of the leadership wasn't reflective of what we wanted to see. So by coming together and making this group work with Health Equity Index Committee, we wanted to deal with the voices and the unique perspective of the Black plight, specifically in healthcare. And so what we wanted to do was provide a voice for us. And the vehicle for doing that is be the change you want to see. So we decided we're going to change some things. And that is to have the first data book ever to be referenced for blacks to non-black. That has never happened in 200 years of the health department. And more specifically, to have a research team that was all black women. That has never happened in 200 years of the health department. So that is what has happened as we brought this together. And the reason we're using life expectancy is because when you have health equity as an index, we don't have a specific measurement. So you have to find a proxy. And life expectancy is the one variable that around the world can be used to compare what we call your quality of life. No matter if you're from New Zealand to Ghana to South Africa, every health department in the United States uses life expectancy to gauge the quality of your life. So if we can do that around the world, obviously we should be doing that in Chicago. And we have now been able to get the unfortunately pre-COVID data for life expectancy, as you stated earlier when you first came on.
Well, and in the report, your team says the information is especially relevant now. You write, quote, underfunded community hospitals and clinics, lower wage jobs that do not allow teleworking, unstable or crowded housing, limited grocery store access, and lack of technology for students are causing blacks and black communities to be adversely impacted by this deadly virus. Blair, this report is based on data, as Ya just mentioned. This is from before the pandemic. Would you expect that COVID-19 has only widened this life expectancy gap?
Yeah, so we know from the COVID data that Black Chicagoans have been more disproportionately affected by COVID and COVID mortality compared to non-Black Chicagoans. And that's for a variety of reasons. Some of that being like the chronic diseases that Black Chicagoans tend to have more of compared to other race ethnicity groups. So yes, we would think that the gap has potentially even widened after the effects of COVID-19.
The report,
and Brandis, I'd like to add one thing to that. Not only has it widened in Chicago, it actually has widened from the national perspective. The gap for blacks in the national from CDC, they just released their report out for 2020 life expectancy is over 6.5 years. The difference. So no matter if we're national or if we're local, blacks are not living, or their life expectancy is worse as compared to others.
So as you all have just mentioned a couple of times, the report identified 5 main drivers of the disparity in life expectancy. They include chronic diseases, homicide, infant mortality, HIV, flu and other infections, and opioid overdose. Blair, back to you. What disparities stood out to you in your research?
I think really all of them. And one that has one of the largest effects is chronic diseases. And there's so many things that play into potentially why the chronic diseases are higher among Black Chicagoans as compared to the rest of Chicagoans. That could be access to healthy fruits and vegetables, safe communities, resources, access to doctors. All those things really play a wide range into why we're seeing all of these disparities across the board.
And yeah, we all know that last week the mayor and CDPH declared racism as a public health crisis. Why is it important to name it this way?
Absolutely. You can't fix what you can't name, and if you don't name it, you can't start to work on it. We have to look at not just naming it, though, and I am so grateful that this mayor was able to do that, and we're calling it a public health crisis because your health is at risk. As we said, this is about the improvement, the health equity of your health and your life and living. So we know that we have to talk about calling to action so we can get those racism and attack it head on. And let me be clear, let's define that racism a little bit. It is the power that people have unjustly distributed the opportunities and resources to cultural others and not to blacks just because of their skin color. We want to dismantle that, and we're going to address it through health and health equity. So this is some of the reasons that we're calling racism as a public health crisis.
And Blair, I'm going to give you the last word. What can be done? I know this is a big question and not a lot of time. What can be done to address the disparities and close this gap?
Yeah, we specifically lay out some calls to actions in the report. One being acknowledge racism, both individual and systematic racism. also demanding for an increase in funding so that these Black communities can have better resources to better improve their health. Also, just acknowledging the issue and the disparity, and that's what we did here. That's something that not many other health departments do, even provide life expectancy data by race. So that's what we're doing here, and it's really just about all Chicagoans coming together to make a change. It's not just Black Chicagoans, it's everyone coming together, because we really have to all work together to really close this gap.
Work for everybody to get in on. Blair Akins and Yas Simpson, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yes.
Janice Jackson was a CPS student who went on to become a Chicago Public Schools teacher, a principal, and starting in 2017, its CEO. Today was her last Board of Education meeting, her contract officially ending next week. It comes at a time of change for CPS. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Yes, Brandis, today members of Chicago's Board of Education officially finalized Jackson's temporary replacement. Former leader of the Elgin School District and the Illinois Math and Science Academy, Jose Torres, will be taking over as interim CEO. But first, the board gave Jackson a resounding, robust send-off.
An exemplary person, educator, person of intellect, charisma.
She did an outstanding job for all of the children, all of the parents, for the public school system.
From Westinghouse principal to network chief, all the way up to CEO of the Chicago Public Schools. You never forgot where you were going, how you were going to take the school system, and more importantly, make sure that every child counted in the city of Chicago.
Brandis, CPS has been your beat. What sticks out to you about Jackson?
A couple of things, Amanda. First, that, she is leaving without the cloud that followed the last 2, maybe 3 CEOs out the door. Her predecessor, Forrest Claypool, after an investigation from the CPS Inspector General. Before that, we all know that Barbara Byrd Bennett went to federal prison. And before that, Mayor Rahm Emanuel's first appointment to that position, Jean-Claude Brizard, was ousted after, or he left after that epic 2012 CTU teacher strike. And, something else that you mentioned earlier, Amanda, that she was a CPS student and a graduate, and she went on to become a teacher, principal, network chief, which is an administrative position, and of course the CEO, but she's also a CPS parent, which is something that we haven't seen out of a whole lot of CPS CEOs as well. So she knows the district from a lot of different positions, Amanda.
Well, Brandis, and that might be why she sounded emotional when she talked about moving on. She called these past couple of years wacky, but says that she is leaving CPS better than she found it.
There's so much that we're leaving behind that I, am excited about, but, a little sad that I won't be here to lead. But I know that we're leaving the district in good hands with the new leadership team and this board supporting them, and the support from Mayor Lightfoot. So I'm very optimistic about the future of Chicago Public Schools.
Wacky is at least one way to describe this past school year. CPS students had their last day of class yesterday, though because of COVID, most spent really the whole year learning virtually. The district's demands to return to in-classroom learning during the pandemic nearly led the teachers union to go on another strike. Now, so far, 25 people have applied to take on the job of CPS's next CEO, and the goal is to have the finalist for that job selected by about a month from now, the end of July. CTU Vice President Stacey Davis Gates has a couple of priorities.
Special education has to be one of the top issues. We've literally been under state control for multiple years. That's embarrassing and egregious. I also think that we have to figure out how to prioritize anti-racist practices within the Chicago Public Schools, considering that 90% of the students who are students are melanated people.
She also says that she hopes for a better relationship between CPS and the union going forward. Now, this even as CTU is fighting pink slips that were issued to hundreds of its members, a small fraction of the workforce that the district defends as annual adjustments. CPS has said that at least as many as were let go can be hired back into other jobs because the district is looking to next year fill more positions than the number that were eliminated. But Gates and some of the impacted CTU members say this shift is unnecessary. Laid off Spanish teacher Dulce Arroyo says that it feels like retaliation.
It sincerely feels like there is a constant war and constant hatred from CPS and the mayor towards its good teachers and good staff members that did what was right and just in order to demand safe and clean schools. What CPS and the mayor did on Friday to 443 of us is cruel, shocking, and wrong.
Another teacher, Sochi Infante, says that she was one of 6 educators of color who was called to the Fanger principal's office last week and told that she was laid off. She says that that doesn't make any financial sense, given that CPS received $1.8 billion from the federal government in COVID relief money.
How can you justify budget constraints when the school district is flush with money and our students are going to lose? How is this possible? How is this equity?
Parents, too, complaining to board members during this morning's virtual meeting, including a Pulaski mom upset that the gifted Spanish-speaking program is going to combine kindergartners and first graders.
The Office of Access and Enrollment is failing our Spanish-speaking gifted kids. Testing and enrollment has been dropping for years. COVID made it even worse, and we all know that this hit our Spanish-speaking families especially hard. And yet it's our children who are paying the price.
Now, beyond staffing, CPS officials are looking to put in place other plans for what school will look like next year. Today, laying out plans for reaching out to students and families to re-engage them after virtual learning during COVID saw high rates of absenteeism. Jackson says it was very important to give parents the certainty of a firm commitment to 5 days a week of in-school classes next fall.
A place where there's a debate around whether or not schools should reopen. I think we've learned a lot about how to conduct school despite the threat of COVID-19. And so I think we're just going to have a much more substantive conversation about how we do that well.
In regards to that, CTU's Davis Gates says that the district needs to continue to be mindful of the science, particularly as there are concerns about that Delta variant and the fact that CPS's youngest students can't get vaccinated. Now, as for older students
12 to 17 are eligible for the Pfizer vaccine. We need to make a better, we need to create a benchmark. We need to create goals in which we meet. We need to make every single school community available for the families that need it.
Also come next year, CPS will be operating under a revised code of student conduct, and this eliminates, really strikes criminal descriptions like assault and battery from the code. It also spells out the rare occasions when a school needs to call the police. You can read more about that revised code of student conduct on our website. It was approved today by the board, and a board that, by the way, is going to be in transition itself, given the state legislature's recent passage of a measure that will take away from the mayor power to appoint board members and instead have voters elect them. Brandis, back to you.
Amanda, thank you. And of course, we'll see you in a little bit, along with Heather Sharon and Paris Schutz for Spotlight Politics. Up next, exploring the city's colorful history of cartooning at the Museum of Contemporary Art. Stay with us.
It really is about community where we all come together.
Chicago needs to make space for everyone.
And there's much more ahead on the program, including our Spotlight Politics team and details of today's fiery city council meeting. But first, as we all know, Chicago is well known for comedy, architecture, the blues, the list goes on and on. It's lesser known for the city's continuing role in the development of cartooning and graphic novels. And the artists who used to be on the comics page have now earned a place in museums. Producer Mark Vitale has a preview of a show about Chicago comics from the 1960s to now at the Museum of Contemporary Art.
There are scary monsters, counterculture classics, and plenty of things that are family-friendly. From Chester Gould's Dick Tracy to original art by Linda Barry and new works by acclaimed painter Kerry James Marshall. Walk through the galleries at MCA Chicago, and it's graphically clear that the big summer show has arrived. Chicago Comics 1960s to now makes the case that Chicago has long been a magnet for creative cartooning.
Every couple years at the MCA, we've wanted to do shows that go outside of the bread and butter of contemporary art and look at some, kind of sister genres and disciplines, whether it's furniture design, fashion design, architecture. And in this case, it just felt like prime time to really look at comics in Chicago. And the more you dig, the more you realize that this town has been ground zero for American comics since the early 20th century.
There's a few different historical reasons. It goes all the way back to the late 19th century, where Chicago really became the hub of the Midwest for lithography, for billboard printing, for children's book printing, and then had these great newspapers here that fostered and nurtured really individualistic cartooning.
There are graphics from underground newspapers of the 1960s, popular comics from the 1970s, and the show has a strong emphasis on the many African-American artists who've called Chicago home.
I selected the artists really based on who had a really unique voice in the medium, both writing and drawing. And I wanted to make sure that the show showcased a diversity of voices, both in terms of where they were coming from, but also what they were saying and how they were saying it.
There's also an abundance of new work made specifically for the show. Models and installations bring some of the comics to three-dimensional life. Another reason Chicago has been a haven for cartoonists and graphic artists, it's more affordable than LA or New York.
Artists could come here and work and make work that's very experimental and still be able to live a decent life.
And as comics became more popular in the 21st century, the cartoonists were able to stay and teach. So now there's a lot of the cartoonists in this show teach and make comics, which is really the first time in the history of the medium that that's happened, at a university level, I should say. And so that has made the city a real hub.
Real comics aficionados know that this city has been an incubator for this work. They know this is the place to come to study it and things. But the general public, I still think, has been unaware. I mean, every now and then you'll find someone like Chris Ware kind of come to the fore, or Daniel Clowes wrote some of his most influential material while he was living here in Chicago, in Wicker Park. I just feel like this is one of those exhibitions that I think Chicagoans can be proud of. We know about Chicago's contributions to jazz and to sports and to the visual arts. But this is a whole other history of the creative arts in Chicago that really needs to be reckoned with.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
And the exhibition is called Chicago Comics 1960s to Now, and it just opened at the Museum of Contemporary Art. A sister exhibit at the Chicago Cultural Center looks at the even earlier history of comics in the city. You can find out about both of those shows on our website. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, after last year's spike in overdoses, what's the current state of the opioid epidemic in Cook County?
All I know is that democracy was trampled on today. That's all I know.
Our Spotlight Politics team takes a closer look at what exactly happened at City Council and why so many are so angry.
Can Elmo go home with you?
Elmo can come to my house.
Was that you pushing?
No. It's absolutely fine. You can come to my house anytime you want.
Are you married?
And revisiting Phil Ponce's adorable conversation with that furry red monster, Elmo. But first, some more of today's top stories. The city is starting to phase out some of its mass vaccination sites. The site at the United Center will close after tomorrow and will be replaced by a site open Monday through Saturday at Malcolm X College. Chicago Department of Public Health says the city will shift its focus to hyperlocal and pop-up sites for now. This mass vaccination site at Chicago State, the mass vaccination site, I should say, at Chicago State University is still open for walk-in appointments until July 3rd. A Chicago pastor says he'll be walking to Washington, D.C. to get the president's attention on gun violence. Southside pastor Anthony Williams says the march is to get the president to issue an executive order declaring violence a public health issue. Williams lost his own son to gun violence and successfully helped lobby Governor Pritzker to sign a similar executive order in Illinois.
Mr. President, we want to live healthy and we want to live without fear. No American citizen should walk down an American street in fear of losing their life.
And the legendary voice of the Chicago Blackhawks is about set to call it a career. He'll do it after next season. The team announced Hall of Fame play-by-play man Pat Foley will retire following 2021-22, and that will be his 39th year in the booth. Foley, who grew up in Chicago, called the job a dream come true. The Blackhawks say they're searching for a new play-by-play broadcaster who will share some of the duties with Foley next year. And now, back to Brandis and a look at another public health crisis. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. Cook County saw a more than 40% increase in opioid-related overdoses last year. While this spike started in December 2019, the pandemic accelerated the trend. Now that coronavirus cases are subsiding, experts are figuring out how that might affect the opioid epidemic. Joining us now with more are Cheryl Hull, the Deputy Director of the Chicago Recovery Alliance, and Dr. Kiran Joshi, Senior Medical Officer and co-lead at the Cook County Department of Public Health. Thanks to you both for joining us. Dr. Joshi, let's start with you, please. Why do you think there was such a big increase last year?
Thanks so much for having me. We can't conclusively say that this upward trend was due to COVID-19, as we also saw a sharp increase in cases back in December of 2019 before any of the lockdowns had begun. What we do know is that people that use opioids have been significantly impacted by the pandemic. National data show that people with opioid use disorder were more than 10 times as likely to die from COVID-19. And COVID-19 patients with a history of any type of substance use disorder had higher rates of hospitalization and death.
And Cheryl, what was it like for you being on the ground and talking with people who were dealing with this last year?
Oh, wow. Like I think I shared with you earlier, you know, me being the oldest person at work, I was off work for maybe 3 months, 2 or 3 months. But when I came back, you could see that there was a lot of fear in people about COVID, stress. People were scared. It wasn't good. I can say that it wasn't good. It was a really fearful time, not only for us, but the participants were, because a lot of them are homeless and, you know, they use drugs. So, but what I did notice, they were really willing to take as much precaution as possible, and I thought that was great.
And Dr. Joshi, from 2019 to 2020, the proportion of total overdose deaths for non-Hispanic, African-American, Black, and Hispanic Latino individuals, it increased, while the percent for non-Hispanic, White, Caucasian individuals decreased. What do you make of this difference?
This is a statewide trend and a national trend as well, and it's something that we're looking into. What we do know at this point is that African-American patients are known to have greater difficulty receiving assessments for substance use disorder and for accessing clinical services such as medication-assisted treatment, which is an evidence-based, proven treatment for substance use disorder.
And you just mentioned treatment. How does access to healthcare play into those numbers?
Absolutely. So in many ways, the general trends that the general patterns that we see of access to healthcare, which are lower in the suburbs and specifically in the south suburbs of Cook County, mirror and are driving, we believe, some of the trends in substance use disorder deaths that we're seeing.
And Dr. Joshi, sticking with you just for one more question, what do we know about this year's overdose numbers?
So this year's data is provisional, so I wouldn't want to speak to that just yet. We are concerned, though, given the increases that we saw last year, and particularly the increase in behavioral health issues coming out of the pandemic.
And Cheryl, in your experience, are you seeing more people coming to the Chicago Recovery Alliance for education and for Narcan, which is the overdose reverser this year?
Yes, it has really increased this year. We were talking about that at the staff meeting on Monday, that people are, how willing people are to be educated about Narcan. They come, they need it, they want it, you know, and I think I shared earlier about being honest, some people are scared to use the kind that's injectable. They are, and I noticed that, you know, because I would ask participant, would you like some Narcan? And they would always say, is that the one with the needle? And yeah, and they would just be too scared to take. And I say, so therefore, if you with somebody and they overdose, that means that person would die. It's a possibility. And so I was so glad that we received a pallet. I think we received a pallet a couple of weeks ago of the nasal Narcan.
Mm-hmm. And Cheryl, I know that fentanyl has played a role in opioid overdoses. Explain what that is and how big of a factor it's been in this increase you've seen.
I'm sorry, my phone is.
It's okay. I was asking about fentanyl and how big of a factor it is in opioid overdoses.
It's 99% of the reason that people overdose is because fentanyl is on not only heroin, now it's on crack. I've even heard that people are putting fentanyl on marijuana. This is what we're getting from the participants. So fentanyl is the major culprit here.
Dr. Joshi, you know, what's your reaction as a professional when you hear that fentanyl is a major problem?
I think it's pretty clear that the overdose epidemic at this point is being driven by fentanyl. Fentanyl-involved deaths accounted for the vast majority of opioid overdose deaths in Cook County in 2020 at about 83%. And this is true in both the suburbs as well as the city.
And now that, you know, where COVID cases are decreasing, people are getting out and about more. Dr. Joshi, how do you anticipate that might change the number of overdoses you've been seeing?
I'm hopeful that it will mean that people are more comfortable going out there to potentially the Chicago Recovery Alliance, getting some naloxone, getting a fentanyl test strip, and getting connected to a substance use treatment provider. I think it's really important to remember that people who use drugs are one of the most, if not the most highly stigmatized groups in our country. And we as public health and healthcare are increasingly viewing substance use disorder as a chronic disease. People who use drugs should be treated with the same empathy and compassion as people with diabetes and heart disease.
And I see Cheryl in agreement there, the way she looks.
Oh my goodness.
Thanks again to you both for joining us. Best of luck in the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Up next, our Spotlight Politics team with what went down in today's heated city council meeting. But first, a look at the weather. The fireworks were in full display during today's city council meeting. Our Spotlight Politics team is here to examine whether this is the beginning of the next council wars. Welcome back to Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. So the Lakeshore Drive renaming was put off again after City Council erupted over parliamentary maneuvering, which cut short the regular meeting. Take a look.
Motion to your appeal is denied. Standing up and yelling without seeking recognition is not something that's appropriate. I have ruled, you appealed the ruling. I have considered your appeal, and I've denied it. We're going to Alderman Harris.
Ooh, Heather, is this the next incarnation of council wars?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's exactly council wars, but it is reminiscent of that. What we saw today was really just a total breakdown in relations between the city council and the mayor, and it has been a long time coming. There have been flashpoints all over the place, and it's sort of all boiled over today because everybody is feeling so much pressure about how this outcome will come on this vote to rename Lakeshore Drive. That has really riled everybody up. And even though what happened today wasn't directly about it, that was the backdrop to it.
And of course, earlier, Heather, we saw, the back and forth between Alderperson Jeanette Taylor and the mayor. Taylor saying the mayor treating her like a child. Is there already some bad blood there?
Yes, the two were at odds for a long time over protections for longtime residents of Woodlawn who are fearful that the start of construction on the Obama Presidential Center will really mean that they are soon to be forced out of their homes as the area gentrifies and more people move in because they want to live by the Presidential Center. So they were able to reach a compromise on that matter, but it's always been tense between them. But Jeanette Taylor was elected with the support of the Chicago Teachers Union. She was a hunger striker to reopen Diet High School, and we all know that the mayor and the teachers union are often at odds as well.
That's been well documented. Heather, who would you say won this skirmish, or is all of this going to work against her on Friday?
Well, it's really hard to tell because we don't know how this is all going to play out. We're sort of in the middle of a council meeting. We started one today. We'll finish it Friday afternoon. But it's clear that the mayor does not have that control of the city council that we've seen under Mayors Daley and Emanuel, and that there is a lot of bad feeling and bad blood. And there are very big issues coming up for the city council, the 2022 budget, how to spend the big federal relief package. So it's going to make everything harder because there's just this level of acrimony and animosity and sort of a lack of trust that people are operating in good faith.
So also on the docket were a packaged liquor sales curfew, a single-use foodware ban, and protections for hotel workers. Here is the statement by the mayor saying, quote, "Today, a small group of aldermen brazenly created a spectacle and did a disservice to their constituents instead of raising their concerns through the appropriate forum. As a result of their cynical actions, the City Council failed to pass protections and relief for our hotel workers, primarily Black and brown women, who were most impacted by the pandemic, and our small businesses. On Friday, we look forward to continuing our work on behalf of Chicagoans." Paris, do these delays mean anything politically, or do most Chicagoans just ignore the sort of infighting?
Well, look, I mean, the mayor's had a contentious relationship with City Council since the moment that she was sworn in, and I have to say it's only gotten worse from there. You have folks that are opposed to her on ideological grounds, but other alder people that are opposed, like Ray Lopez there, because of personal tiffs and a personal style. So we've asked this question, is this council wars? I think we've asked this a dozen times because it looked like there were several moments where the wheels were coming off, and we're asking it again now. Despite all this, she still had enough votes, small majorities, to pass her big initiatives like budgets. But Friday will go a long way to sort of deciding whether this is the start of council wars. If she does go through and veto the Lakeshore Drive renaming, then we're going to have to see whether or not City Council has the votes, two-thirds majority, to override that veto. If they do have the votes, it doesn't appear they do have those votes, but if they do have those votes, then the gloves are really off. I mean, if there's a supermajority in City Council that goes against the mayor, then the future is going to be very difficult for the rest of the mayor's term. But it doesn't look like the votes are there for that.
So the one thing they did accomplish today is agreeing to confirm Annette Nance Holt. Amanda, give us a beat on who she is, the first Black woman to serve as Chicago's fire commissioner.
Yeah, Brenda, just repeat that right there. A woman, a Black woman leading the city's fire department. And this is a fire department, you know, everybody loves a firefighter, but this is a department that has really had some struggles when it comes to discrimination, sexism. There have been lawsuits over this. And this is something that Nance Holt has promised she's going to do. She said she didn't ever see anybody that looked like her as a firefighter when she was a child, when she realized that this was her dream. Well, she made it happen, but also that she really has told the city council that that is first and foremost for her, hiring a more diverse field of firefighters as soon as she takes over.
So another appointment, though, was tabled by two of the mayor's most vocal critics, Alderperson Raymond Lopez and, again, Taylor. They deferred approving Corporation Counsel Celia Mesa until the next meeting. Taylor saying it was over the administration's handling of the Anjanette Young case. Heather, is this really about Anjanette Young, or is this, you know, sort of a parliamentary payback?
Well, it's certainly at least in part about the Anjanette Young case, because if you remember back in February, the mayor apologized, the police superintendent acknowledged that officers had violated Anjanette Young's human rights by forcing her to stand naked and handcuffed and begging for help because they were in the wrong place. Anjanette Young has since sued the city, and the city has thus far refused to settle that case. And that, I think, is what was the flashpoint that touched off all of the wheels going off the bus, as Paris said today, because there's a real sense among the city council that the city should make this right for Miss Young and sort of end this chapter and help her start to heal. The city, of course, might feel differently because it could be, several $100,000, if not $1 million, to settle this case, which, you know, is a steep price tag. So it's all wrapped up in sort of the sense that, you know, there's so much bad feeling, there's so much animosity, and a sense that Mayor Lightfoot really hasn't sort of addressed the fundamental reasons why she was elected: to reform the police department, bring sunshine to City Hall, root out corruption, and people are frustrated.
But I should add in, the mayor brought the point up that, you know, these aldermen did not bring this up in the committee hearing for Celia Mesa to be confirmed as a corporation counsel. So it does suggest some element of theater here today. It wasn't brought up in the committee hearing.
And we should also point out that Celia Mesa would be the first Latina woman, or the first Latina to serve as Chicago's corporation counsel, as we look at a video of her right here. But I want to get to violence in the city of Chicago. The summer is off to another violent start. Mayor says violence and shootings are trending down. Take a look at what Alderperson Carlos Ramirez-Rosa said on the show here yesterday in response.
The data that I've seen shows that violence is actually higher than it was in previous years. However, I think we need to understand that we are experiencing a once-in-a-lifetime situation. The pandemic, of course, saw a spike in violence nationwide. I think we have to take this issue seriously.
So Paris, the mayor says that violence is down, but the numbers don't add up. What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, we do this every year with public officials. They kind of parse the numbers a certain way. So if you look at it one way, okay, homicides and shootings are down slightly in the month of June. So maybe that's what the mayor was referring to. But this year to this point, January to now, homicides and shootings are not down. They're slightly higher than last year. And of course, last year was much higher than the year before. So, you know, it's just parsing the numbers here and how you want to look at it. But it doesn't really matter. The key is that these numbers are very high. There's a significant problem, and stakeholders need to come together to find solutions.
And Heather, you know, President Biden's administration has a plan to address gun violence. What do we know?
Well, he's going to send that tried and true tactic of strike forces and task forces. He's going to target the biggest cities where the increase in violence has been most pronounced: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and that he's really going to use the power of the federal government to bring gun charges against those funneling guns into Chicago. This is long Mayor Lightfoot's request, who feels like there's not much that the Chicago police can do to stop the flow of illegal illegal guns since they come from Indiana, where the laws are much looser than they are in Illinois and specifically Chicago. So she's hoping that this will start to sort of stem that tide. But Paris can tell you, and I can tell you, and Amanda can tell you, is that this is something they do almost annually in the summer. When violence tends to rise, it's unclear whether it's going to make a difference.
Okay, and getting to some other politics before we all have to get out of here. So tomorrow, the FEC is meeting to determine the fate of Robin Kelly as the Democratic Party chair of Illinois. Paris, it seems like Madigan wore a lot of hats. What's the issue here, and what do you think is going to happen with Congresswoman Kelly's chairmanship?
Well, this was brought up when Kelly was running for this post, and they had people in the party saying she shouldn't have this post because under FEC rules, she, as a federal office holder, cannot raise money for state and local officials. And obviously, that's an important function of the Democratic Party. So she's saying, well, there's a workaround. She'll recuse herself, or there'll be a special committee that will raise money for state and local office holders, and the FEC is going to have to rule on that.
Now, Amanda, we know Illinois finances got a bump from Fitch Ratings, which revised the outlook on Illinois' general obligation bonds from negative to positive. So Illinois goes from the triple B with a negative outlook to triple B with a positive outlook. How important is this?
You know, it is significant given how many times on this very program have we reported that Illinois has been downgraded. So sure, it's a win. And what Fitch said is that it is a sign of Illinois' economic resiliency, particularly in the wake of a pandemic when the economy has been rough everywhere. That said, let's be clear, this is not an actual credit upgrade. It is just a change in the outlook. So the forecast, really, Illinois still has what is tantamount to a failing grade with the worst in the nation credit rating. So you've got Democrats celebrating, saying, hey, this is what leadership does. By the way, Illinois significantly helped out, of course, once again by the feds coming to the rescue with coronavirus relief money for Illinois and for other states. What we don't know is how Illinois is going to handle the major cliff that will come when that federal relief money stops in coming years.
And Heather, the U.S. Senate couldn't bring the Voting Rights Act to a debate. Is there even any hope that there will be debate for voting protections and security?
Well, hope springs eternal, but the, GOP is united in opposing federal changes to voting rights laws. There is going to be, I think, more negotiations behind the scene with West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, who is open to some changes, including an end to gerrymandering and voter identification laws. But it is unclear what that path forward is because that same senator, Joe Manchin, is unwilling to end the filibuster, which means that any legislation would need 60 votes to pass, and there are only 50 Democrats in the Senate.
Okay, so another one to watch as usual. Thanks, as always, Amanda Vinicky, Heather Sharon, and Paris Schutz. And as we've mentioned previously on this program, Phil Ponce is leaving his twice-a-week schedule here at Chicago Tonight and moving to special assignments at the end of the month. We're taking a look back at some of our favorite Ponce moments. Now here's Phil from back in 2007 with everybody's favorite fuzzy red monster.
First of all, Elmo, what is your favorite thing to do when you're in Chicago?
Well, Elmo hasn't really had time to do anything right now because Elmo's been running around and working.
Well, do you want some suggestions as well?
Oh, yes. Would you please?
I mean, we have great pizza. We have excellent Italian beef sandwiches.
Really?
Oh yeah, Millennium Park is a lot of fun to go to.
Oh, cool.
You can go to the top of the Sears Tower.
It's a beautiful day, so it's a really nice day for it. So can you hurry up with the interview?
Yeah, okay.
So Elmo will have time.
Fine.
Okay.
I don't mean to hog up all this time.
No, it's okay.
What else do you do in your spare time?
Well, Elmo loves to sing.
You like to sing?
Yeah, Elmo can sing for you too, right now, Mr. Phil.
Please do.
Well, Elmo will sing. Well, you don't know Elmo's world, do you?
Not that well.
Well, you know what? We could change Elmo's world to Mr. Phil's world.
Do you really want to do that?
Yeah. La 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 la, la 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 la, Phil's world. La 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 la, la 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 la, Phil's world. You love to be on TV and you smile good too, Mr. Phil's world.
Elmo, can I use that as a theme show for Chicago Tonight?
No.
No? Okay, all right. Well,
no. No. Too many. You have to pay too many residuals.
You know, Elmo,
yes.
You're very young, but you're very smart.
Oh, really?
Yes, I think you are very smart.
Well, Elmo tries.
Well, Elmo is succeeding. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, Elmo, is you always seem to be in a good mood. How do you always stay in a good mood?
Because Elmo loves life. Elmo loves living. Elmo has so many really great friends, and his mommy and his daddy. We have a great time. What's there not to like?
Well, I'm just wondering because every now and then everybody gets in a bad mood, and I'm just wondering, do you ever get in a bad mood? Is anything?
Well, yes, sometimes Elmo gets sad and angry and stuff, but not. It doesn't last very long.
Doesn't last very long. Well, Elmo, you strike me as very mentally healthy.
Oh, thank you.
Not at all.
Mentally healthy and serious about being sure he's getting paid his residuals.
Yeah, Elmo's pretty savvy.
His music. That's
he
pretty
didn't get to
bright.
be a superstar without being he or she.
Obviously, yeah. Well, we got to see about getting Elmo on the show again. That was in 2007.
That's a tough
that was a while
interview
ago.
to do with a puppet. But I remember that one. I was a producer then. That was a very memorable interview.
You were about a pup then, Paris. And you can see Phil's full conversation with Elmo on our website. Tomorrow's Ponce Moments will include Rita Moreno, Jeff Garland, and Judy Collins, among others. And that's our show for this Wednesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night, live at 7. How residents in Woodridge are recovering from Sunday's storms and tornadoes.
And a church in Bronzeville that became a landmark for Black Catholics prepares for its final Mass. We'll have those details. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm serving Chicago for 37 years.